what, excuse me?
It was redone.
I know. So can we have the roll call, please?
Councilmember Olympus,
I am here.
Councilmember Lewis,
Well, I'm here too.
Councilmember Weiss,
I'm with everybody else.
Vice Mayor Julia, Mayor Whitman.
Okay, public comments.
You slinky.
Seeing none, close public comments. Okay, the first action item is the resolution authorizing the destruction of records
So moved.
pursuant to,
Second.
Aye.
is there any questions on the staff report?
None.
Okay, are there any public comments on the staff
No
report?
problem.
Well, I know, but we're supposed to go through the process. Okay. Okay, well, let's bring it back to the council for further discussion. Do we have a motion?
It's been moved in second. I thought it actually had been.
I remember it.
Pretty quick.
Okay,
Aye.
let's take a vote. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Any opposed, any abstaining?
Okay.
All right, number 2, review of the fiscal 1920 special revenue, internal service funds, and capital improvement program. Robert, I bet you have a presentation for us.
But before Robert jumps into that presentation, or
No, just Robert Barron III.
Robert Barone III, yes.
Barone.
So before Robert jumps into that presentation, this is purely the special funds and internal service funds, not the CIP. The other Robert will be doing the CIP. So Robert can go through
No,
the
Robert
the
III.
PowerPoint.
Robert III.
Robert the third can go through the PowerPoint presentation in detail. It kind of mirrors the staff report, or you can just articulate any questions. Happy to do it either way the council prefers.
Presentation mirrors the staff.
Yeah.
Just
They
in
never mirror the
broad brush. Yeah.
Very
Broad
well.
brush.
And yeah, in summary, they mirror, like George mentioned, I have the presentation here. The study session is just to review the special revenue, internal service funds, and again, our capital improvement program. You have the report before you, special revenue funds. Usually they're required by law to keep the funds separately. We have several special revenue funds. One that we used to have was the parcel tax. We just have residual revenue in that fund. Other special revenues, the library fund, tennis fund, COPS grant, and the Evans Trust Fund. And then our internal service funds are criminal replacement fund, general liability fund, workers' compensation, and the employee benefits fund. So in the staff report, I articulated all the different funds, where we're at as far as revenue and expenditures. I think the biggest one is the library component. It's the first part of your page 2 of your staff report. We're expecting $5.5 million in expenditures for the CIP for the library component this fiscal year. Again, in the staff report, it was listed that we will come back to council once we meet with the contractor regarding the drawdown on it. But as far as the library fund, we expect about $5.5 million drawdown. We have about $12 million in funds currently. At the end of this fiscal year, we'll have about $15 million in funds and to our available funds for the project. Any questions? I'll open up to questions rather than to go through the entirety of the staff report.
Can I ask, is the library fund tracking to expectation?
Yes, sir. And we're projecting 1.4 million, 1,450,000 in revenue. And again, we don't get that revenue till the end of each fiscal year. So we have not received the 18-19 with the library and their projections and their reports through their JPA back in September. That was the same projection that they were using, was the 1,450,000.
Although we have asked the library for an advance of the funds for the entirety of the library portion of the project.
And they said they agreed to that one.
There's a separate MOU agreement for that, yes.
So they can't say no now.
No, they won't say no. But we don't know exactly what we're gonna ask for until you've had the meeting with the contractor.
Well, we're gonna ask for everything based on what our projected project costs are, and then so we'll have that for our cash flow needs versus having to negotiate with the library back and forth each year.
Will those projected project costs be only related to the library, or will we borrow against library funds, against future library funds, for more than just the cost of the library?
We can only use it for the cost of the library, so yeah, they'll just be library related costs. the entirety of it to include not only the construction cost, but project management cost, operational costs over those years, site work, et cetera, yes.
So as we're managing cash flow, would it be possible to stage either payments or actual construction in such a way that the library funds, which we know will have available, can, oh, he's smiling. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah.
That's our goal.
Robert's so excited about this. This is real accounting. We should get the money allocated. and get
Build the
to
library
pay.
first.
That's the goal.
Through the mayor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A question for the chief on equipment replacement fund, the body camera issue.
Did we
Yeah.
move on to that?
Yeah,
Yeah, we're looking at
It's in
the
the
things
equipment
that are in the
replacement
staff
fund.
report.
Okay.
I'm always getting picked on, but it's a little fly on the wall. What's that?
Caught ahead of us.
Yeah, I thought you were gonna have this because I
Hey, it's a-
thought, have we finished with the library?
We're over library. We're on equipment replacement,
We got
which
all
is
the money,
one
so
of the
we don't
funds.
care.
One of the funds.
The next one. Okay.
I'm moving into equipment replacement. I just wanted to get a little,
Bring me along a little bit.
yeah, I'm just trying
So,
to.
say your
keep it-
question again. Now that we're
Related to the,
focused on this.
thank you. I'm
He
s-
didn't ask it yet.
Hey, I'm moving right after library funds. When Robert mentioned funds, I assumed it applied to all the funds that we
Yes,
could
come
ask
on,
questions
continue
about. But Chief, related to the equipment replacement fund, can you go over a little summary on the cameras? It feels like we just did this, but just give us a little idea of what
Yeah, I
happened.
understand. I think the current cameras that we have, which are called DView cameras, were replaced or purchased in 2016. That company has since been bought out by Axon, which is formerly Taser. And so they're no longer supporting the cameras, and we have been having some significant issues with them throughout the last year, technology issues and charging issues, and they will not be supporting them by the end of the year. And supply of the current view cameras, because the topic came up, well, can we get additional views to keep this kind of on CPR for a while?
Right.
A lot of agencies across the country that have it are attempting to do that. We were even contacted to see if we had extras. So, and talking with Robert and talking with Mr. Roberts and others, we felt wise decision to go forward with the Axon cameras, which are new and improved technology, and they also support a platform of digital evidence transfer that now the DA is supporting and encouraging. They aren't recommending Axon, but Axon is just one of those companies that's on the forefront. So it's a 5-year contract. It's $35,000 up front for the first year for the cameras, which includes storage. That's where they're making their money, is on storage. And then it's $19,000 for each additional year. And I can't guarantee this, but I was recently approached by a group of residents who have reached out before wanting to know how they can support the police department, much like what occurred last night. And they're interested in finding ways to possibly support that. So we'll be leveraging that much as I can.
Through the chair.
Yeah.
I have a question. So what's in the staff report here is item number 3, body cams, 35,000. That's only for the first year. It's a 5-year contract, and we're signing for a 5-year contract. And did you say that every year after that is 19,000?
19,500, which includes the storage.
It's largely what the cost is.
There's currently a storage fee with our existing system itself, because anything that goes up there, we don't have so much
I
space.
think my understanding was we were storing it ourselves on our server, I believe. Are we not? I think we are.
Probably.
Yes.
Oh.
Which we're having issues with as well.
Better to get it up
So
there.
our previous views were purchased in 2016.
And actually 2014 was the main initial purchase,
Oh,
and then
okay.
there were a couple
That
of.
was like 5 years. Yeah. I just wanted to know. It seems like these guys,
July 2015.
they go old or
Sorry,
stay old
2013.
every couple
This
of
is
years.
going to be one of the challenges, and you all very aware of this, especially for a police department, is keeping up with technology, because you buy the latest and greatest and within a couple of years. An advantage to these new cameras, which is very interesting, is we have been having some issues. It's a training issue, and it's not just us, but across the country, with making sure that officers activate the cameras. So these new cameras work such that if I'm at a scene I haven't activated, and a supervisor or someone is rolling up, it automatically activates all the cameras that are on the scene, and also incorporates with our patrol cars as well, so we can make sure that we're capturing the data.
But you have to have a supervisor roll up.
Or another person with a camera come, and it will activate. So that helps kind of taking the human factor out of it, and it's just a continuation of something we're always reminding. As you can imagine, when you roll into something and things are happening quickly, it's like you got to flip that soon as you get the call, you're in the office or the car, just flick that thing on and start going, and then you have it. Because it's becoming, as a DA, I was just at a meeting with the DA today, it's critical evidence for them in these cases.
Yeah.
So, in the staff report, this indicates 30 body cameras. How many sworn officers do we have?
We have 21, and so that 30 number I think needs to come down because there's a few extras. Also, we have our records clerk and Monica, the code enforcement, uses it, as you can imagine, with all the contacts that she has.
Really?
And so it's probably closer to
Yeah.
25.
So that number is gonna come down, did you say?
It may come down a little bit. We do need to have some spares on hand.
My guess is around 25 or 26 or so.
And I had the same question on the trauma plates, because I know they're not that expensive, but do we really have 25 people who are gonna be in a tactical situation where they need a trauma plate? That sounds
Yeah, I don't remember the 25 number, but it's 20.
It's on-
I don't think Monica needs a trauma plate or Erica, but the 20.
But our reserves.
But the 5 of us,
reserves.
so, you know.
Exactly.
Are they heavy? Are they very heavy? They have to.
No, it's an insert that goes into the ballistic
Oh, it's
vest,
an insert.
and they have a lifespan, and ours have lived their life.
So all sworn officers, we'll have 21 with trauma plates. It's
Well-
not as if they're in SWAT and they have to have.
But I'm
trauma.
just remembering too,
No, I
we do
understand.
have 4 reserve officers, they also are equipped the same as our officers, so that's where that number is coming from, as well as the body camera, just remember that about the reserves.
I see.
So Chief, on the cameras, so it's a 5-year contract. I would have hoped that we would have identified the cost over 5 years and then just say the current year is this. So when we're buying a multi-year thing and it's a commitment, I think it's appropriate that we understand what our full commitment is. Secondly, if it's a 5-year deal, are they under warranty then for
They
5
are,
years?
complete
So if they
warranty.
fail, because I would have, and what type of, with the current ones, did we have any sort of contract with them? It doesn't matter that they are out of business, they have to honor their warranty.
That I don't know.
Well, I think we should check into that before we,
Actually, what has happened from personal experience, when somebody goes out of business, it's usually because they lost a big lawsuit or something,
Mhm.
and they go belly up, and they don't honor their warranties.
well, I
after
didn't
that.
understand that they
Well,
went
back
out
to
of
my
business.
original comment, their department's always scrambling trying to find extras because they don't manufacture them anymore. So
Okay.
they don't support them anymore, so even if I say, hey, Axon, I need a replacement for this EU, it's all part of the industry.
And our initial purchase, Carrie corrected me, was in 2013. That's where we purchased the bulk of our cameras, and then we purchased successive
Okay.
replacements and expansions over the course of a couple of years.
Well, okay, but when a company, if they get bought or they merge, then the buying company then assumes all the contracts.
Not necessarily, it's not legally required, and that is a problem.
Well,
It just depends. And in this case, Axon did assume VIEVU or VIEVU, however you say it. And we don't know if they assumed liability, but what they're telling everybody is they're no longer going to service them at the end
they
of the
just
year.
say that, well, you say end of life, that happens, end of life, but, all right, well, just make sure the contract has a warranty item, I would think that, and then also, like I said, I know we're not buying a bunch of other things, but if it's a 5-year deal, then show the 5-year cost, yeah, Rick.
I have a different question.
Okay, just a quick point on that. When you're buying memory and you go out 5 years, you should have some language in there protecting yourself. It's quite possible that the memory will be costing about 1/10 what it costs today, 5 years from now.
Yeah.
So we could look pretty stupid paying $1,000 for memory that's selling for $120, something like that. And that's the way the technology's moving.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to comment too about how critical they are from a risk management liability for the town. It can certainly save the town upwards of millions of dollars based on the incident because we have a piece of equipment
Yeah.
to help us.
There's 100% support for it.
Yeah.
That's not the issue, it's just making sure we get a commercially reasonable contract.
Understood.
So I have a question. The 40mm launchers sound like artillery.
Comes with the tank.
Comes with a beanbag, though.
Yeah.
We need that in Atherton, yeah.
We had a bazooka at one time.
So if you, would you like information?
Yeah.
So, and it will be demonstrated not on me at the Citizens Academy as part of our full day, but
May 18th.
what it is what they call, it's not less than lethal, because it can be a lethal tool, but it gives the officers another less lethal tool in all the crisis reduction training and interdiction training that we're getting. And it's becoming critical again in litigation and our uses of force. That we've used every tool to de-escalate the situation, from verbal to hands-on to taser. And what the launcher is, it's a riot control tool, but it also has a less lethal. And it fires a large round that has a blue collapsible nose, and it's shot into the stomach area to basically put the person down so they can drop the knife. And it's our last resort before we go to firearm. That doesn't mean that we're going to go that way in every instant. It could be firearm instantly, but it certainly gives us that tool. And again, talking with the district attorney, it's important for police departments to have those tools available to demonstrate and show. We had every tool available to avoid what we had to do, and they are very successful tools.
And just as an FYI, in terms of an example of when we might use tools that we purchase, what's the name of that vest? The wrap. The wrap vest. Yes. So in 2015 or 16, I can't remember what year it was, but Ed was here. There was an incident at Menlo College with a very large Samoan individual on a bus who was on some sort of
Altered state.
And it took 4 or 5 individuals to bring that person down. So the wrap came in handy at that particular time, but the less than lethal opportunity may have as well.
And we currently have 1 launcher, and the request is for 2, because our patrol team at a minimum is 3. That way every car has one available, rather than a car being there, the sergeant's carrying it right now, and sometimes you can't wait and you need it right now. So we felt it was a wise decision to equip patrol to have that available.
Are there tasers also?
Everyone has a taser, yes.
So the advantage of this is it's a longer distance?
It's a longer reach. So the taser is about 25 feet, and I forget the distance, the effective distance of it, but
it's a lot more than that.
Further reach out and touch for officer safety.
And when you say launch, is that launching a beanbag?
It's similar to a beanbag, so it's a round discharged like a bullet, and it is launching it.
So I did bring this up with George, and the chief mentioned the donations. And so since these items go into our budget and presented and they're budgeted, then the donations come and then replenish that. I'd asked George not to get who's donating, but that we have a report maybe annually on what our donations actually were. So that we know that, we can track not only the efficiency of our performance to expenditures, but also where we had essentially found money, we can track that too. So, with that.
If I can change something a little bit, I have a question about the workers' comp fund, because it seems to move more radically than the others. Can you tell us what's going on with that?
Well, the workers' comp fund,
We're moving on to the next one.
I'm sorry, if you're not done. I mean,
No, I'm good with it. I like that, moving forward.
No problem.
It's my philosophy.
so the workers,
Bring me along.
the workers' comp fund, we fund it based off of the JPA. They send us assessments. In each assessment year, we pay it's with Cities Group, sorry. Cities Group is our JPA for workers' comp. So through Cities Group, we get an assessment every year. And what we do with workers' comp is we charge each department a portion to recover those for the cost of workers' comp. In PD, it's 11%, and all other departments is 4%. And it's at a percentage of salary costs. So that's how we we charge it to the workers'
Cost
comp.
allocate.
Cost allocate, correct, thank you. So we allocate it to the workers' comp. And so in our revenue, we're projecting $399,000 in charges of workers' comp through the general fund. The majority of that is the police department. And then $275,000 is our budgeted expense. So of that,
I'm sorry, just so I understand. Are we trying to get those two numbers to be the same?
no. What we're trying to do is we're trying to get the two numbers to actually the expenditures to decrease on the fund. Right now, we're charging to replenish the workers' comp fund, so that the workers' comp fund can be self-sufficient, or it's not, the charges aren't as high to the general fund. Over the years, we've increased the charges to allocations to the general fund to recover the replenishment of the workers' comp fund. So our goal is that the expenditure component, it stays in line. It doesn't meet, doesn't actually equal what our revenue component is. Right now, the estimated assessment is $158,000. That's in that $275,000 expenditure. We're recommending, and we recommend in operations budget to allocate $110,000 to our equity. Last year we contributed $235,000 towards our equity, and this year we're recommending that $110,000 to maintain that reserve equity with Cities Group. Again, we're the JPA, but we're mostly a self-funded fund.
So, George, you and I spoke about this, and I think you might be able to embellish a little bit more and
Sure.
clarify some things.
We have limited options with respect to workers' comp as a governmental agency. There's state fund, and Robert jump in if I'm
Right.
off here. There's state fund, which is considerably more expensive than our current JPA option. Most agencies are part of a self-insured JPA group where we are responsible for a self-insured retention amount, and then beyond that, the pool picks up the liability. Beyond that, it's shared amongst the pool members. We've been with Cities Group for quite some time.
Yes.
And in years past, we've had a pretty high workers' comp incident, and it's been gradually reducing. And we
Mostly
get-
police.
Mostly police, yeah. When we eliminated our public works department, our exposure
some.
went down, because those are contract staff, same with building staff, et cetera. So now our largest exposure rests with the police department,
Before we move, and
before
everybody's gonna have a herd back.
possible, from all those
But
boxes.
I guess what I find, a couple things, the numbers seem to be moving quite a bit year over year. And so what we had last year, in terms of or this year, in terms of what we adopted figures that show our expenditures exceeding our revenue.
Correct.
And then for the year we're about to adopt, 1920, that flops. Our revenue exceeds expenditures, and our transfer in is reduced. That feels like optimistic assumptions or something. Why is it so different from last year?
Well, last year it was because in that 392 number included only 151,000 in our assessment, but it included 235,000 in our contribution towards that reserve equity. So that see how that 235,000 is a transfer in from the general fund? It's in that 392,000 as an expenditure.
Why don't we understand, how many did we have that were out on disability last year, and how many have come back? And so I think that would help explain why there's a change, because, as George said, we pay up to a certain limit, and then, then it goes, the rest of it goes to the pool. But if we had more people go on disability than other jurisdictions, then that organization would raise our assessment to kind of balance things out, because they see it as more of a risk organization as opposed to the other jurisdictions.
It's like what they call the experience mod in the private sector.
And I will stop asking, but just now I'm more confused a little bit about the timing. Did you just say that 235, that's 1819 transfer, is counted as a 1920 revenue? Okay,
No,
good.
that's not.
Yeah, so let's just go there, because that's where I started. The term revenue with this fund makes no sense to me. It's gotta be a transfer, right? Is that
It's
charges?
It's charges from the fund.
Wait, the 361,000 this year and 399,000 for this coming budget is a charge from the fund?
It's a charge.
That's what the JPA is charging us?
No, it's what we're charging our operating departments.
It's an internal service fund, so it charges other accounts, our general fund administration, our general fund police, our general fund public
Right,
works.
we're causing each of the different departments that have a workman's comp
They
need
have a budget, right?
to transfer money to this fund, right?
No, it's a transfer from the general fund, but it's a charge to each particular account.
It's an
Okay.
expense.
Yeah.
It's an expense.
Okay, and then what is so that I think of as a transfer from the general fund that you're charging to each appropriate department. No problem. Just the term revenue
Right.
doesn't quite work for me.
It's a little bit of a, no,
And then
misnomer.
what is a transfer in?
So the transfer in is prior to a couple years ago, we used to use ERAF funding to whatever the ERAF was, we would transfer to allocate to OPEB costs, where we would transfer money in for workers' comp costs. So that's this additional transfer to pay down our negative equity reserve with workers' comp. So the last couple of years we had negative equity reserve. So this transfer in was just to true up that equity reserve. Meanwhile,
To prevent a larger assessment
correct.
from the cities group JPA based on our experience model.
Because our expense number, which is what we have to pay out in workman's comp, is greater, was greater.
During
So
that prior period of time.
than what their expectation was, I take it. So we had to transfer in to cover that, because basically we're self-insured, is
Right.
essentially what it is. Is that right? But I still have trouble with the difference between revenue and, so transfer in is really transferring,
From one fund to another.
It's
General
transferring
fund.
revenue from one fund to another, which is why accountants refer to it as revenue.
So
but wait, I'm sorry, maybe I'm just slow. I get what you call revenue. That word is a transfer from each of our departments to cover their current, their workman's comp exposure with their cost, and that's ultimately going to the JPA.
Mhm.
And then the transfer in is an additional transfer to the JPA?
To the fund.
it's to the fund from the general fund. So
I see, so, sorry, let me just work it my way. So the blue item, which we're calling revenue, is a transfer out from the fund, it's a transfer, is it coming to the fund?
the blue is coming
It's
into
from the
the fund.
departments, and it's going to the fund?
Yes.
That's right.
Okay, from the departments, but then the pink is a transfer to the fund just from the general fund without being allocated to a department?
Yes. So
And why wouldn't we allocate that to a department?
because that was additional funding from the general fund that we would put in the general fund summary report.
But we're having to do that because we've had a greater expense than we expected.
We're actually trying to build
True
up equity in true up history, but to also build up equity within the workers' compensation fund, so that
That's
operationally,
our
that's
internal
ours.
fund.
Right, so that the cost that we charge out to each of the departments is less.
Smooths out.
Mhm.
It smooths out.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm not sure why we're doing that, so sort of we're pulling from the general fund to stick it in there so we can charge the departments less. Ultimately, it all comes from the same place, right? It all comes from the general fund.
Yeah, and that money, the 235 and the 110, Robert, isn't that from ERAF in each
Yes.
of those particular years?
So those transfers in the general fund summary, we have them listed as transfers out below the ERAF component. So they're listed as transfers out in the general fund, and we've had it for the last several years. So last year it shows 235,000 we transferred out from the general fund, and it's transferring into this fund of 235,397.
So was that something you started?
Something we started, yes. Me and George, we started.
When we moved the ERAF to below the line?
Yes,
and
this
all
started
that
back
stuff,
in
and you started-
fiscal year 15,
Okay.
and we've been doing this.
Yeah, no, I understand, but I'm just trying to help
I guess
everybody understand.
the good news is, I mean, is this a real indication of our actual expenditures for workman's comp, that it has gone down?
It's,
So,
It is,
mhm.
but we've had some history,
yeah,
so it is tapering down.
it is different.
Yeah.
And how low would you expect it to go, or optimally want it to be?
There's a threshold that the cities group wants us to maintain
Yeah,
as a
uh-huh.
self-insured program, and I think we're kind of at that
Right,
presently.
we're at the threshold.
But as I was talking to the mayor, there are other options. In fact, you may recall, at least two of you will recall, back in 2013 or so, those two, we brought to you a comparison of the state workers' comp fund, cities group fund, and the California Joint Powers Insurance Authority.
I was here.
We were there at the time as well, and we compared those funds. And at the time, because of our workers' comp history, it was far too costly to change from cities group to CJPIA, and state fund was just way too costly. But now that our experience mod starts to even out or even decrease, we can look at that again at some point in the future.
But aren't we dependent on one or two? You know, you have 20 officers, you're one or two injuries away from blowing it back out, right?
Yep,
Yeah.
any given year. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And what we've been doing is just trying to mitigate that to keep from our assessments going higher. A couple years ago, the city had an additional assessment on top of their yearly assessment. We paid that off, and truing up our negative equity every year
One
has
claim
allowed
can
us.
spike it.
Right.
Right.
And I believe last year we had about 14 claims outstanding. This year, and it's listed in the staff report, we have 11 open claims outstanding, and the cost of the claims are approximately $597,000.
That's terrible.
We have 11 open claims over how many potential
Well,
personnel?
there's only a handful of current employees
Right.
for those 11 open claims, I think.
Right.
2 or 30, the rest
Right.
are former
Or just
employees.
Former
previous
employees.
claims.
And workers' comp can go on forever for
Right.
some of those former staff.
Yeah, we have one
Hospital
from the
visits,
90s.
follow-ups.
Time to close them out. I know from our business, workman's comp is a huge expense.
Just so you know, nobody at this table has an active workers' comp.
Yeah, we
That's
have.
And nobody on this
really
side.
sad.
Currently.
Caveat.
I wonder if Teresa's gonna get her
Hey, you
the
go.
last day.
I pulled a nail off my desk the other
Yeah,
day.
my salary.
Jeez.
And they
Let's
take it out
pretend
of
we
my
have a lawyer
salary.
here and change the subject. How's that?
Okay, moving on.
Speaking of,
Correct.
General liability fund, I have a question about.
Okay.
So, your description was that we have projected expenditures of $280,000. And that's composed of $180,000 of liability that is related to employment practice coverage, and $100,000 that, if I understand it, you're kind of putting aside as an estimate
Correct.
of 4 potential claims at $25,000 a claim.
Mhm. Correct.
And why are we doing that? But we didn't do that last year, right?
No,
we did.
We do that
we've
every year.
always done it.
yeah.
Oh, we've always done
It's
it.
required by the JPA.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the general liability is your trip and fall and your lawsuits for excessive force and things like that with PD or other issues related there too.
Right.
Tree issues.
Tree falling on
Mhm.
them.
But we have a pretty good sized fund there, right? This is the general liability fund. We've got $500,000 in it.
Yes, correct. And
And
so,
that- it acts as our insurance essentially.
Yeah. Another self-insured program.
right.
How about that tennis fund?
Tennis fund.
I saw Mike just.
Yeah, I don't know,
He was
what
all
other,
excited about it.
whatever other
Yeah.
questions you have, I can go through, I don't wanna, keep going down PowerPoint.
The contract with Mike Joseph goes for how long?
We extended it, I think, for 3 years, and then we went through the,
Through construction?
Yeah, it was 3 years. We extended it for 3 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, last year at the Clay Court opening, he spoke to me about the need for getting the courts redone, and we took a little tour, and I spoke to George about it, and he went out and looked at them. And so this year, I guess there's 3 courts,
yeah,
and
so
then
we're
in the
doing
budget,
3
there's
and then
another
we're
2.
budgeting
and-
another 2.
And of course, he would prefer that we dig them out and redo them, but he understands that we're tight on, funding. So, but he's back. He moved back up here. I guess he was down in LA.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah,
He's
but
back.
I saw him yesterday actually.
Good.
It expires now in September of 2021.
Gotcha.
Yeah. It's
Good.
really nice that the town is investing in the courts,
Yeah.
whereas there have been years and years and years past where the council did not invest enough in the courts.
There's other improvements too. The tennis shelters getting improved in the near future.
Well, that was budgeted last year.
This year.
It's an amenity.
This group.
It's an amenity.
We're still in this year. Yeah, okay.
Current year.
We're talking about next year.
Correct. Yeah. It was budgeted for the current fiscal year.
Yes.
And it's gonna be done, right?
Yeah, we were having a little trouble finding so we have the supplier for the shelter. We've been having a little trouble finding a contractor to put it.
It's too
Mr.
small.
Amoroso.
Amazon Prime just
There you go.
launched a handyman service.
I saw the
Did you
email
see that?
today.
I did too.
Pretty soon you can order a drone,
I mean,
deliver,
can
just
you-
drop it, and it'll.
I don't think,
Really?
so they say that anything that requires a license, they can't do.
All right, okay.
So it's a handyman, so.
It's a little handyman.
The Evans Art Fund? How's that
It's a
going?
drone.
That's what I thought. Thank you.
Yeah, it's almost done.
It's gone, right?
Yes, it'll be gone this
Take care of that page.
Yeah,
CIP.
CIP. Okay. The other, Robert.
Switching Roberts. Robert 1,
You want to go off that presentation?
Robert 3, good job.
thank you.
22/20.
RJ, is your resolution date, RJ?
Or 5 years.
Well, it's supposed to be
Our 5-year program.
23 to
1
24.
year through the end. So, so the CIP identifies basically, tries to identify as a planning tool 5 years worth of expenses in the capital improvement program. As we move forward, what you will ultimately adopt with the budget is just the upcoming fiscal year. And so even though we're showing some intended expenses over the 5-year term, it is solely the upcoming year that you'll be acting on as part of the budget.
But can I ask you a question about
Sure.
that? We can put items in those future years, right? But in terms of real budget, it's only this year.
That's correct. So you could forecast expenditures for the future, and as we get closer to those years, they may shift. You may move them up, you may move them back. And with that year's budget, you would adopt the actual anticipated expenditures.
Just on that, some stuff either flops over a fiscal year into the next fiscal year or takes a long time. How do we are essentially committing future funds. Like we just, I don't know what this contract is in the body camps, that's a 5-year contract we're entering into.
Yeah.
Are we able to drop it next year? The council, yeah, we changed our mind and we're breaching that, we just breach it or
I'm
what
going to
happens?
say that
No, he said sign
the
a
budget
5-year
is
contract.
comprised of a couple of different things. So
Yeah.
let's say, for example, we have a project that you've approved and we haven't expended the money. That money, if we have a contract, it's encumbered, particularly for the CIP because it's construction
Right,
related.
right.
Right, so when you approve that contract, you're encumbering the money. When it looks at that 5-year budget, and we'll get to a few examples, we'll talk about projects that are desired, that are budgeted out. Until it comes to that actual year that we plan to do that work, if you don't budget the money's not there to expend.
There are circumstances where we're encumbering funds for the next year.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
Bonds, grants.
And that makes sense because
Yeah.
contracts go over fiscal
Yeah.
year boundary lines.
yeah, and so I think the Civic Center is,
There's an
Civic
example.
Center, the
There's an-
library,
yeah.
when we did the Mark Channel, it was
Yeah.
the same thing.
Mike, the short answer to your question is, if there's no contract, it's not encumbered technically. So you could change it, you could say, it's a 5-year program, but we're not gonna do it. After,
Yeah.
I mean, you
But it's just, it's possible that we
Yeah.
could
Yes.
encumber something for the next, yeah.
and,
perfect- makes perfect sense. I just
and
wanted to be sure.
certainly you have the option to reprioritize things as we move through this budget and future budgets. So most of the, so we'll be going over kind of what the, the group of projects are, what the funding source, you have in your package, the funding sources for each of the projects, and the needs are based on the various master plans that the council has already acted on, as well as our payment management. move over. Next page.
This is where I would have thought that we would have put the donations. I know that we're not forecasting donations because we don't know when they're coming in, but.
Well, I think the next slide, actually, we have listed there, we have the general fund, the special parcel tax, Measure A, Measure M, the gas tax, and that includes the SB1 allocation that we're going to get, donations that we've received for the Civic Center, the Library Fund, as well as the Atherton Channel Fund. It's-
Yeah, so donations for the Civic Center
Civic Center.
are part of
Yes.
the CIP allocated funds, but donations for equipment and things like that are just shown as revenue to the
And
general
that's
fund.
because that's in the operating
In
budget.
the operating budget, yeah.
Um,
So is this
and-
different than what was in the staff pack? The
No.
individual charts, right? Other than the summary.
No, it should be the same.
It should be.
It's the same.
Okay, got it, no problem, because we didn't have the summary charts in
Okay.
the staff pack.
And so we have a few primary categories where our projects lay in: streets and transportation, drainage, and town building, parks and facilities. As you know, the most significant project that we have going on is the Civic Center and Library. We're projecting about $850,000 towards drainage and $725,000, I think, for roadway maintenance projects.
Yeah.
Page down. Sorry about that.
Oh, perfect.
How, through the chair,
Now that's the
we're
way you
still
speed this
using
along.
some of our special parcel tax monies?
Yeah, we
And
have,
so how long will we?
I think that what we're showing is saving some for projection out to expend next year. So we have the upcoming fiscal year and then some of those funds being reserved for expenditure the second year.
Yeah, it's really for the,
There you go.
channel, or
Um,
the special.
Well, there's $175,000 going to the bike
Ed.
work
But there's this
for
one.
2021.
Yeah, so there are a few locations where we
For streets.
saved some of that money for the next fiscal year, the 2021 fiscal year.
At the end of your CIP packet, we have to go through all the projects, is a fund by fund breakdown. So if you look at the parcel tax, you can see what projects and then in which fiscal year and when the fund runs out.
Yeah, the parcel tax shows 300,000 in each of the next 2 fiscal years.
Yeah, and then it's pretty
That's
much
on page
expected.
17.
So on the road improvement,
Yeah.
there's so much construction going on in the street, we're about to have in this town, we're about to have more. I see these big trucks that have to be hard on the roads.
One right down the end of your street.
Yeah,
What is that thing?
it just has to be hard on the road. So how are we planning for that? A, are they paying, when people are driving, big construction projects, are they paying something that goes into this? And B, we're on a regular schedule, is it working out?
I'm
properly
going to
with
say
those
that the
constructions?
things that we do is that for major construction projects, we make them mitigate the damage to the streets that we can attribute to that project.
Yeah.
So if it is something that we can tie in, we do. So typically, what you'll see is that along the frontage of a lot of projects,
Yeah.
they end up having to redo a section of the street or do a lot of repairs, whether it's on the edge because the heavy equipment broke the edges off and that kind of thing.
But just in terms of general
for-
wear and tear from big trucks driving down the roads, does that affect our maintenance schedule or anything? Is everything tracking okay?
Well, I'm going to say that I think as identified previously, to maintain our roads in their in their condition, we should be spending a lot more money than we do. And so over time, we are trending down. I think we had the last PCI report said that our roadway conditions are deteriorating slightly over the previous one that we did. And so I think, if I recall correctly, we're supposed to be spending somewhere around $1.2 million a year. And what we're budgeting now, because we don't have the extension of the parcel tax, we're proposing about $750,000,
But since
$725,000.
we don't have a road impact fees like almost all the other jurisdictions do, and we eliminated it knowingly, and obviously you can't go back and get that back. There is damage to the streets, just from the normal, heavy equipment coming through. And I would think that we could come up with a guesstimate on what that cost could be, and put that in, somehow get it into the permit fees.
That's how the road impact fee was actually structured.
Yeah.
Well, it was,
The problem with it was excessive, right?
It was like a double.
And it was challenged.
Double whammy.
there was a challenge down
We
in
dropped
LA or something like that.
No,
It
no,
was
no,
challenged
ours
here.
was specifically challenged.
That was one of
Yeah, but
the,
it was
So we
challenged.
couldn't justify it?
No. There was
But
a-
I'll give an example of what we do. So if, for example, somebody's trenching through the street, or, either longitudinally or laterally, we have a repair section that is basically 5 feet on either side of that trench to help mitigate some of that damage. It's not necessarily the wear and tear that you get from truck trips that go up and down, but like I said, specific things that are directly attributable to contracts that we can do, we do.
I'd make the observation that one thing that's unusual in this town is the amount of construction that's going on.
I agree.
And it just feels like those trucks do a lot of damage to the roads. And if there's
Yeah.
some way to capture that, I think we should
Well,
at least look at it.
well as the ones coming from the other jurisdictions.
And the ones that are working on ECR are exempt. So they're not,
Well-
same thing with ones working at the schools.
But, probably true. And there's certainly construction at the schools.
Yep.
But we all know there's an enormous amount of construction in the town. And because of the unfortunate experience we had with that road impact fee, we've kind of gone silent on it.
The opposite.
We are gonna be looking at some fees, right? I mean,
Yes.
And I think we should look at this, I agree with what Mike's saying, that we haven't really taken on construction and what to do about it, and we all know about it. You can't not know about it in this town.
Well, it's kind of a policy choice between trying to go the road impact fee route. Other jurisdictions still have a road impact fee. They may or may not have been challenged. Ours was challenged and we dropped it and walked away from it. Or a parcel tax route, specifically for drainage and roads again. Both have their risks, but they have different,
Yeah, but one puts the money, one spends the money across, or
Right.
the need for the fees, the tax, so to speak, across all the residents who aren't necessarily causing the construction. The other one says, pay to play.
right.
And with the loss of the parcel tax, we may have not have been as diligent to recover what we were covering in the parcel tax. Well, now that we don't have the parcel tax, it's something to reconsider because we do have the construction.
So,
And there is a legal memo out there, I think, from,
yeah.
Could
So
we
my
have a
com-
conversation? I'm
not
sorry.
our attorney.
Well, my comment is, I guess there's a lot of construction of old houses being torn down, new houses being built, the additional property tax revenue that we will realize because of the improved property is not a one-time event. It's a year after year event. And so that we need to kind of actually factor that in to our equation, and how much are we really going to be getting in additional revenue, even though our percentage is small, from that particular property over the next, 10, 20 years or whatever.
What Robert just said is we're not spending enough. So whatever
No,
we're getting
exactly,
from the
yeah.
historic stuff, that's
Yeah.
not working, or
Yeah.
we need to reallocate or
Yes, we
redistribute.
used to have the highest
See, it's a
PCI,
choice of
in
where-
Just like last year, I
index,
thought.
yeah, like.
the biggest problem, I think, is exactly what Elizabeth is saying. Fees by law can't exceed the cost of providing that service. And so when you're talking about development fees, you can go out and you can get engineers to estimate what it's going to cost. The problem is, construction for a single-family residence is different than like they're doing in Menlo Park, these high-rise and everything else. The numbers have got to pretty much equal what it's costing to basically that you're
Right.
recouping from them. And
However-
that can cost you, those kinds of studies can cost you an awful lot of
Well,
money.
I don't know, but
I honestly don't think that's the issue. I mean, I understand that issue.
Well, that was
I-
the issue
no,
one
no, no.
that we lost.
Well, but that's because we didn't go out for a vote.
Oh, well,
So-
no, that's
no,
different
no.
because that's a
No,
fee
hold
rather
on.
than a tax.
Well,
Yeah.
I don't know why we couldn't craft a road impact fee. We can call it something different if we want to, but that effectively taxes contractors in the town that are engaged in having large trucks go through our town, and instead of just trying to get it through as a fee, which I understand the problems with that and the need to only cover costs, but if it could be crafted in a way that was intelligently done, so it has to do with construction, and we went out for a vote. So it would be, we can call it a tax.
It is a tax.
If it's voted on, it's approving a tax. I think our residents would be much more amenable to approving a tax. What, can I finish, or would you like to
No,
go
no,
ahead?
no,
She's
go ahead.
anxious.
I'm just anxious for you to finish. Hurry.
Well, I'm
I
thinking
got you
through
right.
it.
I
Let
got
him-
you.
let him
No,
finish.
got
But
your
I think
idea.
that our
Yeah.
residents would be more amenable to approving a tax that is paid for by the construction industry for the impact that they have on the town,
It's like the business license.
more than paying it by parcel.
I agree.
So,
Other people,
I agree with you, Rick, that is one idea and one way to go. I do believe that we could go around to all the existing construction sites that are happening right now and take a physical picture of the house under construction and the condition of the road that is like within their right of way. And right here, another one in that, and you can see where those trucks have done, and you can estimate how much it's gonna cost to repair that section of road. I'm talking about Alejandra, and Rick.
But that's
No,
what I'm
so
saying, we do
example
that.
for that is that we actually make them repair it.
Yeah,
before
but
we
the-
finally-
But-
yeah, but that's
what
the
we-
area
Right,
in
that-
front of
Yeah,
their
front of
house,
the house.
but they drive further than just in
That-
front.
that
They're
is
not
it.
parking
Drive
there
through
like
the
that
roads in
thing
town
down
and
there.
impact the roads in town.
But can I suggest, I don't think we need to solve it
Yeah.
at this
Right.
meeting, and maybe what we
Yeah.
need to do is identify
Yeah.
as an issue for further
Yeah.
exploration.
Well, if I could just, one thing to Bill, we were spending a substantial amount of money, and we're not spending that on the roads, and the roads are deteriorating. So the difference is what we're spending now and what we were spending, and that could be the fee. I mean, you could think about that from that perspective, or we could go Rick's way, similar to the business license tax, which we should probably revisit, which would also give us additional revenue to cover things like street maintenance and things like that.
Through the chair.
Yeah.
I think that if we looked at our street plan and we correlated that with construction, we would probably have more of a foundation to say associated with construction, we are targeting the areas of construction, therefore the needs basis is based on the construction impacts to those roadways instead of arbitrarily, not that we do arbitrarily pick streets, but it doesn't seem like there's logic to how we, we're not out there going, this street needs to be done. But if we actually had a formula saying the construction sites in this area X, these streets get replaced because they gotta come off of Middlefield Road or whatever the case is, we'd have a better argument to say that the cost of our street programs are associated with a construction component.
The engineered fee component of it has to be property specific.
Yeah, here's the problem. We had a fee before, and God knows, I walked in and, forget the very nice lady's name.
Waiting
But, no, there was a lady whose husband.
Carol
was a-
Flater.
Carol, thank you. Came in and sat down and said, this fee is illegal and we're in court and blah, blah, and I know nothing about it, but welcome to town. And here's the problem. If you have a development fee, it goes across the board. So somebody comes in for a minor expansion, a re-roofing, anything, they have to pay this development fee because it's a percentage of your business site, your building permit. That was what was going on.
By the way, I'm sorry, so does that mean, how much were we talking about?
We're talking about a lot of money.
There was a lot of money.
On some of the big houses, a $25 million house, they were paying a couple $1 million of development
It was
fee.
egregious.
And what happened
$1
is,
million of
It
development.
was
yes,
We were only
because it's
pulling
not
in
just, look,
about $2 or $3 million,
There's-
$2 million.
I just looked it up, while we were sitting here. The road impact fees statewide, they did a study, and there was $178,000 in Fremont for a road impact fee for developers. Now, granted, most of those are subdivisions that are going in and creating new roads, and they're saying, you're gonna have so much heavy equipment and stuff, makes sense. But if you don't do it, and a lot of this stuff was pre-Prop 26. Prop 26 is the one that said, everything is a tax. All of your revenue is a tax unless it's one of 7 exceptions.
Yeah.
And the problem is, most of those exceptions take the Prop 218 approach and say, you cannot impose a fee that exceeds the cost of providing that service to the public.
Unless you vote for it.
No, that's a tax. That's
Right,
the
and
tax.
then it
But
becomes a
if
tax.
it's not a fee, then it becomes a tax.
And
And if it is a tax, then you have to vote for it,
identify a fee
and that is a way that some people will get around it.
It's just too hard to identify an accurate fee amount?
Sure,
That's the problem, it's difficult to do.
sure. It's incredibly difficult to do if you think about it. If you could be
There's no
doing,
like Chevron deference
You
that
could be-
applies or anything like that?
you could be doing a $25 million house construction that doesn't involve a whole lot of heavy equipment. I mean, it's theoretically possible. You could also be doing one with concrete ramp packed stuff and like a city hall, and that would utilize a whole lot more cranes and big construction and things like that, because we don't have a whole lot of multi-story buildings here. That those tend to be road killers. Just drive down El Camino Real and Menlo.
And it's usually based on the valuation of the building.
Again, I think the thing is, identify it as just
We
an
can
issue.
certainly, we can,
Let's add it to a fees.
that is certainly something to
Base.
study. Rick, you're absolutely correct. That is a good thing to look at in the study. But understanding, learn from history. Don't do what was done before. Across the board, here's
Absolutely.
everybody gets
Or
to
we're
pay a
destined to
huge
repeat
amount.
ourselves.
Absolutely. Nobody will disagree with that.
Okay,
Oh, this story.
moving on.
Well,
You
so
didn't say
is,
anything, did you?
I've got a couple questions.
Good. Okay.
He's right. Move it up.
All right, I mean, we can either go through the
Yeah, why don't we go
presentation.
through it and ask questions as we hit certain
And,
parts
I
that we
mean,
wanna ask
you
the
also have the
questions.
details on the specific
Yeah.
projects in the
So we're
staff
never gonna
report.
get through this.
So also in streets and transportation, we have our bike and ped program. Our big project is coming up. We've awarded the contract for the Middlefield Class 2 bike lanes project. The expenses for that are in the current fiscal year. And so we have a nominal amount of money programmed for the bike and ped program coming up for either minor improvements, but more than likely trying to find some grant funding opportunities so that we can put in a couple of grant applications this year if there's something that matches our, that we would be successful at. Okay. Drainage improvements. We have the Euclid Parker ditch relining project. We have the current project that's under design for the Carton Field Water Capture Facility. The funding for construction and further design development is grant funded through Caltrans, so we don't actually have the monies programmed in our budget because it's not one of our funding sources. And the project's not fully approved yet, so it's not there. We have continuation of the Bayfront Canal study. Though we have an MOU that caps our contribution, we have not yet agreed to the cost of construction. And then we have some needs as we finalize our green infrastructure plan. We'd like to start looking at what we can actually implement moving forward. So, next.
Wait, I have a question
Yep.
before we leave the drainage. So, the most significant project other than the roads is this Euclid Parker drain ditch
Yep.
project, which I have no doubt it's needed. We want that ditch. But, we weren't focused on the Channel District being a potential funding source when we did the Marsh Road work. And I know that there's a lot of history on that Parker, Euclid, Stockbridge drainage area going into what I think is called the Redwood Creek. I know that I'm not aware of there being any kind of a district having been created for that. But there's lots of history on funding for drainage solutions there. And, you know, we don't capture some of this history well sometimes. And I'm just raising it because I'm aware of it. I haven't done the research on it. But I know that there's quite a bit of history around, when that ditch was originally put in, who put that ditch in originally? Somebody had to pull quite a bit of money together to put the original ditch in there. We're now talking about relining it at the cost of $750,000 to $850,000.
We should look at recoverable costs.
Yeah, I think we should know how that was put in and whether there isn't some, because doesn't that benefit other than just Atherton?
It does. Looks like John Deere did it.
Yeah. So my comment is that with this sea level rise stormwater management agency that we've just agreed to become a part of, that there are going to be opportunities for projects like this for us to apply to that agency and to CK to get money from. I really think that that's something that we should look at and not try to go it alone, because I think there's certainly it's regional. It's not just Atherton, because it affects other districts other than just us.
Well, the Euclid
This
Parker
is
ditch,
a local drainage.
it's a local drainage. It just drains Atherton properties out of town.
To the old channel location for Redwood City that's
So-
bricked up.
But this,
Didn't you start to say there was a district of some sort? What were you starting to say?
No, this is not in a district, so this is just
It's
part
a-
of Atherton.
Yeah.
yeah,
It's a local drainage ditch.
It's an easement
Collects
that
water
we have
from-
responsibility.
From neighborhood
Do you believe
streets.
that we constructed that existing ditch out of general fund?
It was either likely constructed either out of general fund or it might have been done as part of the subdivision.
Right, Parker.
the way it looks like
Yeah,
it probably
where the
was a
expressway was
subdivision.
going
But
in.
part of the problem is that
Yeah.
the neighbors have encroached on that and it's become an issue. My other comment on this budget item was that, of course, you did talk about the green infrastructure project. And while, I know there's still discussion and there's gonna be other EIR work and stuff like that, should the Carton Field or whatever it's gonna be called thing go through. I thought that when we had that discussion, that the green infrastructure plan was something we're saying, well, we haven't gotten a contract, we're not moving forward on the Carton Field thing, so we have to plan for the worst and we have to do green infrastructure. But as I understand it, we're a little closer on that, obviously. And so I guess the question is, how much are we going to spend, which is the question that we asked at that
So,
council meeting. Why are we gonna waste any money on doing this? Why can't we
So
delay
we
it?
have our regulatory requirement to
Yeah.
complete the green infrastructure plan by the end of this fiscal year and turn it into the regional board with our annual report.
The end of this fiscal year.
End of this current
That's
fiscal
what,
year.
2 months or whatever. 3
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so that work is ongoing. We'll have to set up a workshop for the council on that. There will be some decisions that will be made as to kind of what green infrastructure looks like here in Atherton, as well as what we would do as a town and what we might foreseeably ask development to do in town. And so those decisions will impact what we're forecasting for our costs. Right now, this is a placeholder. We could, I think, council requested a walk along the channel to look at some Band-Aid fixes. The money's in the Atherton Channel District, and as we go through that, we can shift those funds to doing some minor repairs within the Atherton Channel.
In terms of the water capture project,
Yeah.
I met with the two representatives from the college and the school today, walked through the timeline for that particular project. We've got to get through the environmental part of that project before we're going to bring it to the council to approve a 20% design of the project. Because once you approve 20% design, you may recall that conversation from Holbrook Palmer Park, you're committed to doing the project. The college, while they've said, yeah, we agree in concept to this project, there are still some details they have to work out between the college and the school. That at today's meeting, they said, yeah, we're committed to this project, we want it to happen, but when's our last day to back out? And so they still have that on their particular radar, and that's not gonna, we're not gonna know that until September, October, when we complete the CEQA part of it, and get to the 20% design and the development agreement back to the council.
We gonna get the grant money or
Time
not?
out.
Yes, the grant money will.
Time out,
we'll
we
do
have
that.
a council member that has a conflict with this particular issue. If we're gonna discuss it, he has to leave.
I don't think we're talking about
No,
Yeah, it's
we're
just
talking
information.
about it. It was
That's
just
why
a
I'm like-
question for the.
I just wanna make sure we don't get further into it than we are.
Through the chair.
Let me change
Yeah.
that. Are we gonna
Go
get that
ahead.
green infrastructure plan document done in 2 months?
We'll have to draft.
Well, wait, we approved it and
the
we
way it
approved the
works, right?
budget. Did the contract get let?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
they're working on
So
it.
they're working on it now?
Yeah.
Okay.
So as far as the Parker project, I'm kind of in agreement with Rick as well as Elizabeth in this $1 million rough project that we, one, try to secure a funding source, and two, if we span this out till the agency's more into effect, this is a project that might fall in line with something that we could get participation on, because, you know, there just isn't a resource for $1 million project that is going to clearly benefit some rear property owners.
Well, this project is largely funded, in fact, entirely funded by the special parcel tax.
The Euclid?
Yeah.
We could take that
We
money
could
and
use
put
it
it
for
on
other,
roads.
we could use it for other things, that's for sure, but we
People
did,
should have thought about that when they didn't vote for the parcel tax.
Oh,
Okay.
really? It
A lot
is-
Parker, huh?
Is there urgency to get that done this year
it was one of the priorities identified within the drainage master
within the
plan
drainage
to
master?
be accomplished.
I think we should, go look at it again.
Yeah, see if there are any frogs out there.
Wait, no, that's, frogs is the next one.
Oh,
We're gonna find out how the
They're all over the
population
place.
actually is. But,
I think 50.
you know, I think that this thing has a potential, I would expect, based on looking at it when we walk through it,
Mhm.
of flooding and flooding that neighborhood. And I don't think, I agree with Elizabeth's comments, we should be looking for grants on it. But I do think that, I don't think that we can just keep pushing it out and ignoring it. Personally, that's my view. I think that area, people have built into the channel, and I think that there's real property risk if we have another winter like we've had.
I would agree with Rick's earlier comment. I'd like to hear a little history on it, because I remember there's an expressway in there somewhere, blah, blah, blah. I'd like to know the origin, how this got created.
All right.
Do some research on it.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Bill.
Yeah, okay, no problem. Let's find out about the frogs.
They're there. I saw
I
them.
would like to know how many.
Yeah.
I mean, there's this report, the last report is written here on this picture, and it is to Duncan Jones, who doesn't work here anymore, and is dated 2006. So,
What are you looking for?
Some old
Wait,
He's
there
looking
now.
at the photo in the
Program.
CIP.
Let's see.
I did send out to the council the more recent, via email today, the more recent habitat reports
okay.
and studies that were done by PlaceWorks. And those, I can't tell, I didn't read them in terms of the count of the frog population, but the habitat,
It was 2018.
yeah,
That was the
2018, yeah,
2018
it's the last year's report. and they do it like every December, November, January.
They're playing more music out there.
When did you send that? I didn't get it.
Earlier today.
Oh, there it is, okay.
Yeah, I counted.
The upward Atherton chain.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
So moving on to the park.
Perfect.
As you know, we're gonna be relocating there, and so at this time, we're not looking to do too much at the park, but, you know, previously identified was the need for the turnaround at the end of the parking lot by the pavilion, so we do want to get that done, as well as some site lighting improvements. And then not included in the CIP, but in our operating budget for informational purposes is looking at the remodel of the restrooms at the Carriage House.
And then within the CIP report itself, you've got a couple of projects that are not budgeted, but could be planned for future years. And one of those I spoke with the Vice Mayor about today is the park circulation and pedestrian circulation improvements, which is a lot of activity in the frontage of the park. It's probably not something we could do while we're there, but certainly something the council can program into a future year if you so desire.
You mean that circulate, where we're gonna tear out the asphalt and put in DG? Yeah, I think that we should forecast that. That's something I think everybody wants.
Can I, through the
Go
chair,
ahead.
can I circle back to what Robert Obadia just said about the new bathrooms in the Carriage House?
Yes.
You're doing new bathrooms in the pavilion.
We have the contract for, or we had the approval of the contract for the pavilion.
How much is that?
That was
80.
about 60 plus contingency, I
It's
think.
about 80,000.
It's the town's, it's electric field.
You should see
Um,
finishes.
But you went over that.
What is it?
So,
And so is it the same look and feel as,
we haven't started the design effort, and we were gonna rope in a couple of committee members, and if there's a council member that wants to be involved in that process, we're happy.
Early stages.
I don't think we need to do that again.
El Blanco.
You don't think we need to do what?
Have a bunch of council members looking at tile.
Well, if they want to.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah.
If they want to, we're open to it.
So I think you all
I
don't
think
want
it'd
me
be
to do
nice
it.
to
How's
have an
that?
interior designer take a look at the tile,
That's
to do it,
okay.
an interior designer.
That's okay, yeah.
But what we had, and God bless them, is a volunteer from Park and Rec, and, you know, a volunteer, well, from the park, you know, and they're not interior designers.
Let's have an interior designer look at it.
And
When we get to
Well,
that
if we're
point, we
spending
can do that.
$80,000 for bathrooms, I think we should be happy with what we're designing.
Okay.
And if anyone on the council wants to be involved,
I think it's
I would encourage her to be involved.
I agree with you, involved.
So a couple other things on the park. First of all, on the circulation plan, we've already had it designed, right? We spent the money to have a designer design it.
Yeah.
It was budgeted, I think, last year.
Right, not the project,
And
it's prior.
Theoretically, it would have been done if we hadn't started looking at the water treatment facility. I know it's $500,000. It's not a small project, it's a big project, but it will dramatically change the feel of entering the park. And I think for the positive, I think it's a good design. I think we should put it in the, ahead budget. We currently expect this project to be completed by the fall of 2021. So if we put it in the budget of 2021-22, expecting that we could do it in the spring of 2022, that makes sense to me. I think it's a project we want to do in the spring, not in the summer. We want people to enjoy it in the summer. And so it would minimize the rental impact if we do it in the spring. And if the Civic Center gets delayed, we'll just push it out a year.
Well, I think that we should push it out a year from what you were saying anyway, because we have other things that will be coming up. like streets and things like that that we're ignoring while we're siphoning all the money off of the civic center.
Well, we don't have the, if we had the,
Well, I just think that we should be realistic, Rick. And I do believe that we should plan on rolling out a little bit further. We can always pull forward. But you set expectations of people when you put it in there, especially the Park and Rec Committee, you set expectations that that's when it's gonna be. So, yes, you can push it out, yes, you can also pull it in. I recommend that we push it further out so that we have the money, when the Civic Center and the library are done, we will have other things that will have occurred in this town that we will need to take care of. And like we just talked about, the streets, we are going to be slowing down our maintenance on the streets, and they will get further and further deteriorated. We will have to come back with a bigger program. And so I think that we should think about that as we move forward.
that's a consequence of not passing the parcel tax.
It is.
One of the other
I
things,
feel like too bad.
one of the other things to think about is part of our movement to the park involves occupying an entire parking lot. There's gonna be some heavy equipment, there's gonna be trailers, there's gonna be utilities that are gonna be pulled in. When we leave, we've gotta fix all that.
Road impact fee, yeah.
We've gotta fix all that impact into the park. So it would make
And
sense
that's
to do
exactly
those,
the area that this is gonna be.
yeah, it would make sense to do those remedies in repair consistent with our
Withdrawal.
park circulation element
Yes.
plan.
The circulation thing in the front was a great idea, and it needs to be done. I think everybody agreed. I don't think anybody said no to that.
Right.
Putting
But-
it in is
But I
just
don't
the
agree
time.
with you on your timing comment, because I think that when we remove those trailers, we're probably gonna have to resurface that parking lot. And there's gonna be all kinds of stuff there that needs to be done. And that's exactly the area where this is, and if you're gonna do that work, you might as well do this work at the same time, it's more efficient.
Instead of doing
Well, I'd like to see.
work with waste.
I tend to agree with what Rick's
I'd like to see
saying, although
staff's
if I could
recommendation.
mention, my sort of overall preference for the park still remains less pavement and concrete than wherever possible. But yeah,
This
if we're,
actually reduces the
Yeah.
pavement.
but it seems silly if we're gonna be doing work in the park to do it and then a year later
Do it over.
do it over.
Well, I agree with that, but let's get staff
Yeah.
to tell us what they think and what the
I don't
timing's
think-
gonna be.
Staff.
Bill, I don't think it's, too far from what you're saying also. I think, it will evolve. And I think you're just trying to set expectations a little bit more, not so optimally, so that people will be disappointed if we can't do it, sooner rather
that's
than
exactly right.
later.
Thank
But I think once it plays out, it's all gonna be fine.
Right.
Let's not argue anymore about it.
Okay. Then moving on, I think.
So wait, one more comment on the park. The staff report shows $130,750 for the site lighting.
Mhm.
The master plan showed $93,750. So I assume this number is, I don't really remember whether this number must have included some work that's other than what was identified in the master plan.
I think there might have been some other minor.
Maybe, was there a path that we were gonna put in at the same time? I don't
Yeah, there
really.
was
I think
something
there
in the
was
front
next,
budget.
I think there
Yeah.
was a DG path next to some power equipment.
I think going back toward the carriage house, there might
Yeah,
have been
but
a
that's already
DG
there,
path.
but that was put in.
So,
But that DG path was put in last year. It was along the side of the road so that
Right,
people
it's
didn't
along the
walk
side
on
of
the
the
road from the North
Yeah.
Meadow parking lot to the carriage house.
Narrowly, you correct.
That was put in last year.
That's
Done.
exactly right.
Done.
Picnic area.
Yeah.
Picnic area design and construction. That was what was also in last year's budget as part of that 130.
Oh, well, that's different from site lighting.
Well, it said
What
site
including
lighting,
site lighting?
replace 10 poles and fixtures,
Yeah.
plus picnic area design and construction, estimate 137.50. So
Okay.
it combined those two projects into one. The picnic area was left out of this narrative here.
yeah, with the thought being that I don't know that we want to do some do that kind of construction while we're occupying the park.
Right, so that number of 130 may be less. if they're
It will
looking at
probably be less, but since the master plan was developed, obviously costs have risen as well.
That's
Exactly,
And
so
so
why don't you
bump it
guys
up.
look at what you
Right.
think the right cost will be for the
And come back.
actual site lighting?
Yeah.
I think that's fine.
While you're in the park, do you need any more video cameras?
No, I think you said we had like,
We-
what,
we have
13
one
video
right
cameras in the park?
I didn't know we had 13 based on that comment last
Yeah,
night.
I didn't
Yeah.
either.
I don't think
Would you
there's
like-
that many.
Would you like one by your front door?
There
No, I
is
think there's some
one-
secret cameras by the house, but I'll find them.
They're inside.
Please don't find them. It's half the entertainment we got around here, you know? Okay.
Yeah, Sherman was putting them in before you moved in.
Before you got there.
So,
Sorry.
if I recall correctly, there is one camera that's right there in that median island of
There it
that
is.
parking lot.
Yeah.
And
Yes,
so I believe it's looking pretty much right at
so
where
it should suffice for the building.
it is. If we need to make an adjustment to it, that'll be done.
That way I can watch you guys in the trailer.
That's already
exciting.
assumed that you are.
Except when we
Yeah,
have the camera.
keep track of what time they show up.
How about that policy focus?
We get a report along with the front.
Okay. So with that, if there's any additional questions on specific projects identified in the CIP, happy to answer.
I have none.
That's not either.
Thank you, Robert.
Okay.
That's all we need from that item.
Okay, item 3 is going to be staff reports that some people will participate in and some will not.
Absolutely.
There is no staff report, it's all
Staff report
council.
is done.
Council
reports.
So you guys want to leave now? If you
Yeah, we can go.
Just good.
So I sent mine out. Yeah, it was in your boxes.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
didn't
I
get
gave it to
it.
Francesca, she
Francesca,
copied it and
She did a great job.
in the
The
box.
important people
Just
got it.
in
You
the
only send it
box.
to the important people, Rick.
I got it.
It's in your box.
Francesca.
Oh, it's in our box.
Yeah.
Because I delivered it yesterday.
Yeah, he was,
Look at
Right,
you.
so in addition to
Unfair.
my comments on the Park Foundation, I was asked to also say that, obviously, we just had the Easter egg hunt, we collected $76,071, or $7,671.
Oh, did I say 76?
Oh, man.
Damn.
That goes in addition to.
Bill's donation of 70,000.
Yeah, that goes in addition to the $35,000 that the Friends already had in their account. The spring and summer fundraisers brought in $10,000 and $6,000 respectively. So, right now, Frank and the foundation are looking at, as I pointed out, areas where they can contribute to things for the park, and I listed what those 2 things are that are the top 2. One is, one of the items that we've talked about is the bandstand, and so that may be something that jointly the city and the foundation could do together.
Wait, what is that?
The bandstand.
Band.
You mean the
Is that the
stadium
amphitheater?
or the bandstand?
Bandstand,
American
which is
Bandstand.
listed in your report,
Right.
Is that the amphitheater?
by the amphitheater,
Right.
yeah.
Future
Putting on a
concerts.
bandstand where the concerts would be,
Future concerts.
or doing
Wait,
some artwork.
where
or
the
something.
amphitheater is, that's like,
I'm just looking at the report.
That's that little
we just-
depression,
Ditch.
right? Yeah,
I
exactly.
don't
That's
know
what
that
it
you
is,
want
yeah.
to put people in.
It's the retention pond.
Yeah.
Yes, I think it is.
It
We're
is.
digging a deeper hole.
They're,
One of the things that was in the park plan,
Master plan
master
was making it
plan,
like-
was a bandstand.
Right.
just like Frost.
Yeah.
And so
Right.
they're interested in carrying out that vision.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That came from the Park and Rec Committee. Would you remember?
there's nothing, the word bandstand is not in here, I guarantee it.
It's an amphitheater.
It's to attract people like Adam Levine.
Why would we have that? We have like somebody better. Okay, so anyway, The rest of my
There is an
report,
amphitheater.
so the rest of my report is there for your reading. If there are any questions, I'm more than happy to discuss those.
I do have a question. Can you just talk about Surf Air for a minute? Just catch us up.
So as you know, Surf Air has rekindled their flights. Not very much, but they're starting, and they keep putting out new schedules. They did move some of their flights over to Oakland. Many of their, they still have an operator. They're the name, but somebody else is operating. There's still issues with the contract that the county is trying to work through, as well as their bankruptcy proceedings with regards to the taxes that they've had. As their flights are ramped back up, and especially in light of the bad weather we had during the winter time, there were a number of increasing complaints, and I spoke with Mike Callaghan a couple times, and also we've emailed back and forth. And so he worked with the airport director, and they sent me a report that I gave to George, and he sent out, and I just got another one just the other day, and George has that to send out, where they're counting when the flights are coming in and how many they're in. So, we're tracking that. I've also asked Mike, as well as Don and Warren, and the airport director, could they please talk to not only the Surf Air pilots again, but also talk to the other commercial flights that go in and out of there, which there are some. There are charter flights, that they would request the BVA route. The BVA route was not approved by the FAA, and so it cannot be mandated. So it has to be one of these things where, first off, they get trained on it. Then secondly, they say they have to ask, can I take the BVA route? And then the air traffic controller says, yes, you can.
Optimum conditions.
And so,
this is old news.
when we went and spoke to Anna Eshu about things for the fire district, we did bring this up, Carrie and I and George, and we discussed the fact that she said that she personally had looked into it as well, and that she had recommended that the supervisors relook at that contract because it was delegated down from the county manager to the airport director to sign the contract, and the supervisors, according to her, had never reviewed that contract, and so as such they could call it back up for review and possibly do something. The other thing that Mike had told me was that they are remodeling some of the terminals out there, and during that remodeling, tie-down spaces will be reduced, and that Surf Air would lose 2 of the
But afterwards,
ones that they have.
what's going to happen when it's done?
Well, he's planning on not giving it back to them. But that's what they say and what they do is always different things. So that's the situation with Surf Air. And Joe Stratton, who you know and who's been to a couple council meetings, most recently he went to the Board of Supervisors meeting just last week. I haven't gotten his report, but he was going to also comment some of the things that I've spoken to and written to the supervisors in Callaghan about. So I'm sure as people spend more time outdoors and have their windows open, we'll get more and more complaints as their flights potentially increase. But right now, I think it's in the last report it was like six
2 to 5.
flights. Was not the one that just came through.
Not much.
So it's six
6
flights, and
flights
so
was
it'd
in the
be
last
six times 2, so it's in and out. But they did put out their June schedule, and it has an increase. So we'll see which ones transpire, which is where, Callaghan wants to take a wait and see attitude. I'd suggested to the supervisors with Mike on distribution that perhaps we don't wait for that, because the more we wait, then the less opportunity we have to actually affect the change. That's in not even a nutshell, in a little more detail what that was.
Yeah.
Okay?
In the interest of time, I provided a copy of a staff report for Caltrain, which will be of Caltrain and High Speed Rail. That was their presentation they did last week. Some interesting notes in there. Take some time to absorb it because that gate downtimes and such are kind of important. Fire district stuff. I've also included a copy of the fire district's most recent. The AMR agreement is the most current thing that they're on their dinner plate. Bill, myself, and staff met with members of the district yesterday and presented them with, you know, the town's list of things to look into to co-participate in, and they're going to take that, and we're going to have another meeting scheduled up. So everything's moving forward.
It seems like what Virginia said yesterday was that it was our ideas for the most part seem reasonable and they're well received, but they're going to think about it and we're going to meet again in about 2 weeks.
Let's just say they were stimulating. I'll leave it at that.
Okay. They didn't talk about their salary. Mike, over to you.
Let's see. Good. So Grand Boulevard Initiatives, it's moving slowly, to be honest with you. We've had a couple of meetings. I don't think anything really major to report on. The plans haven't changed in a good long while. Commute.org, meeting more regularly. They're picking up more. They've actually, as opposed to Caltrain, Commute.org has actually picked up ridership fairly substantially, actually, and seems to be hitting its stride a little bit. I will say it has very little effect on Aston as a town.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm happy to go and all that, but really, there's no routes around here and no activity around here. This is my two big reports.
If I could, on the commute.org,
Yeah.
one of the things that they fund is the Menlo Park shuttle bus. And although it's not in Atherton, they go up Glenwood, they go up Oak Grove.
Yeah.
You know, they could drive all the way to Middlefield and make a loop around and drop people off at the bus stations that are up there on Middlefield, as opposed to dropping them off at Laurel and making them walk up there. I don't know.
Do you think there's demand for that?
Excuse me?
Do you think there's demand for that? Is that a good thing from our standpoint or a bad thing from our standpoint?
I just was thinking about the people that are walking up there.
Yeah.
It might increase the bus service, so no, that's probably a bad thing. But there are a lot of people that get off that bus and walk up to Middlefield.
Yeah.
Some of them are high school students, and some of them are people that have to take the bus to Redwood City or down to Palo Alto.
I could certainly look into it. I'll say they're pretty strong on metrics. You know, they know exactly how many people are on each van.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And they're trying to maximize that number, obviously, which means they've been not cutting down routes, but their routes are very precisely calculated to make sure they're hitting usually businesses and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Well, let's see. I'll participate here. Everybody get your Earth Day invitation?
Oh yeah, mine's
Yeah.
framed.
It was free.
You got one, Frank?
Framed on my whiteboard.
Good. Well, one of the highlights is going to be a panel that's going to be moderated by Vice Mayor DeGolia, and it's on local clean energy and efficiency. So this is this coming Saturday from noon to 3:30. But you're going to get lunch. It's going to be nice. Also, Peter Dreckmeyer is going to talk about local water supply and conservation. And the keynote speaker is this guru, Franklin, his name is Lynn, or he's a PhD. He's a former Undersecretary for Science and Energy, Professor Emeritus at Stanford Energy Resources. Climate change, where do we stand and what do we do about it? So he's the keynote. So this is what the environmental program has been doing for the Earth Day. After this, they're going to take the approach of our approved climate action plan, and with staff highlight the prioritized, which we've already done, but we'll just really focus on that. We're going to get a couple of new members, and so I think they'll be all rejuvenated on that. So that's one of my committees. It seems like I'm involved in airplane noise and traffic congestion. I went to a meeting that actually we met with that woman, Mila, remember, from Palantir?
Yeah.
Okay, and
I've met with her.
and you did, and
Yeah.
so last week on April 18th,
Calling the name, by the way, that's very impressive.
yes, she, Joint Venture Silicon Valley put together the talk that this woman from Palantir has been working on this. It's like TMAs. Now, Atherton has traffic management plans, right? But these are TMA agencies in Palo Alto, but across jurisdictions from Santa Clara County to Menlo Park. And so she put together this meeting with 8 corporate transportation specialists from Google, Intuit, LinkedIn, Facebook, Genentech, and then 8 elected officials from Sunnyvale,
She met with all of
Zeldas.
us.
But
Excuse me.
at this
Yeah.
meeting,
Okay, but
that
she,
you-
she met with all of us,
Yeah.
and because I gave her all of y'all's contact details.
so but no,
Yeah.
you didn't, it was
I
for
didn't.
mayors, and you didn't go, I went
Right.
because you went to the Arbor Day. I mean, the tree planting ceremony.
Yeah.
It was very, very
Yeah.
instructive because, they've got it all laid out for the whole summer meetings going on. Paired us up with the elected official and a corporate guy. I paired up with the Facebook guy because, where we are. And so you went and you huddled and, talked about his challenges, our challenges, what they're doing, what we'd like to have them do, how we can partner. So the next step, next meeting. So I think it's a very, very interesting approach. It's called the Manzanita Talks, and they've got meetings scheduled for the next several months already scheduled out. So I don't know how I got involved with that, except for the mayor asked me to go. My other really big deal, a big time commitment is the San Francisco Airport Roundtable, and that takes, a whole nother, it's on a life of its own, dealing with the FAA. I've been involved with that for a long time. It's not only just the meetings, but it's the subcommittees, and we're now working with the Oakland Forum and their group to work on this one specific procedure. It's called the night hush, and if we can get the FAA to make the modification, a lot of the people on the coast are going to be very much relieved. So we've got the FAA talking to us and coming to our meetings right now. So it's just very a long slog. CK, there's a whole list, and I'll send this. I tried to print it out, but I couldn't make it work. But I'll send it out to you. It's the list of all the regionally significant projects that CCAG is going to be approving, and it's interesting because it shows the opening date of the money projects, and it's something that the CMAC committee reviewed and will recommend to CCAG for approval. We've got this month and next month, and then it'll be approved at CCAG in June. So, you guys, if I send this to you, you might want to take a look at, and if you have any comments, get back to me. George, let's see. What did you? Oh, you got that list also. You're on the distribution list. Okay.
And you and I will be going to the RV discussion
Mm-hmm.
a week from Friday,
Okay.
and we attended Jerry Hill's meeting.
For SB 50.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, so there's a lot of stuff like that.
Okay, so now it's up to you.
And part of the CCAC committee, I'm on the PMC committee, so as we get going on that, I don't know.
We may have a meeting of the CCAC. We talked about that with staff. We really won't have a formal meeting unless there's some change to
Yeah.
the plans that requires their input, but they haven't been engaged in over a year.
Right,
And it probably is an opportune time to have a
disband.
opportunity for a brief discussion to sort of update them on what we're doing, which I think is fine. And the concept of putting a pathway along this fence line from Ashfield to Maple is something the contractor and staff are going to look at. Looks like that might be a possibility, which I think would be a great solution for Ashfield.
Residents.
Yeah, for the residents, I mean, I think Ashfield residents are going to be shocked.
I'm sorry, just sorry, am I okay if I sit here and I'll say
There's
anything,
another
or should I leave, or?
I can stop, I don't need to report on that.
What pathway?
George,
I'm
you're
happy
on
to,
that.
I am happy to walk away.
No, it's all right.
Oh, yeah, but you wouldn't come back.
I would take a pathway.
I think I close to that pathway.
You're gonna
It gives
forge
things-
it.
I've been staying at Mike's
It's an important
house.
topic, I don't wanna
Hey,
not have it.
Mike,
go
if you
forward.
need some staff members to escort you, there's a whole bunch of
We
them.
got, we got,
I'll take you.
Sorry, I'm just trying to.
Now,
Yeah.
it's okay.
Okay.
I mean, I don't I mean, I'm spending a lot of time with PCE and
Yeah,
we're actively looking at expanding into the Central Valley.
Oh.
And it's not clear that we would change the JPA to include people in the Central Valley, but because if we do something with the Central Valley, it's very important for them to have their own independent body, because their focus is quite a bit different from ours. But there's some very interesting economic synergies. They use a lot more power in the summer, and we use more power in the winter. So we can buy power and distribute it based on that load balance in an interesting way, which will save both organizations money. And we've had interest. I mean, one city has asked us to come and present to the city council, and they're ready to sign up. Small city, so we're not going to really do anything until Merced is in line. But in 2 weeks, I'm presenting to the Organization of County Governments for Merced, which will, it's probably like CCAG, it'll be representatives from the Board of Trustees as well as all of the cities on, what we've done with PCE and what the economic advantages are. They're really interested in the economic side of the business.
So, on BCE, I know that when, in the formulation time, spoke to Jan at one of those meetings when you weren't there, about PG&E has these different programs, and they said, well, we're not gonna do that. And PG&E is now getting aggressive with rolling out newer programs for old people and disabled people and things like that. And I've been approached by some residents saying, hey, can we get this through PCE? And I remember that they hadn't, but I don't know if they're going to start.
I'm not sure what programs you're talking about.
Is discounts. You get
All
a
of them
discount
are
structure.
available from PCE. All of the discounts that are health or income or disability related that you can get from PG&E are available through
Well,
PCE.
maybe we could get that all published, make it clear.
It's hard to imagine that PG&E now can be offering more discounts, because they're,
They're fighting for their life.
yeah, they're also going asking for a boatload of more money.
Executive raises.
Yeah.
Bonuses.
PC. If you come to the Earth Day event, Jan will present exactly what PC is doing in terms of programs, but we've been slow to roll out programs because we've built our reserves, and we have about $130 million in the bank right now. So we're at that point where we're going to start rolling out programs, and there are two big programs we're rolling out. both are focused on transportation, because transportation is the largest contributor to greenhouse gas in San Mateo County. We're going to deploy 3,600 EV charging stations in San Mateo County. And we're going to do that in businesses and at municipalities and in multifamily dwellings. And one of the problems with SB 50 is this issue about no parking. If there isn't parking in a multifamily dwelling, people aren't going to buy EVs. So, anyway, that's a big program. It's a $14 million program that PC is doing. PC is also exploring a program to encourage lower income residents in the county to be able to buy used EVs, and the PC will put up $4,000 toward that purchase. So that's a big contribution. Now, you can buy a used EV right now, 2 or 3 year old car for $10,000.
So Rick, what's going to happen to PCE if PG&E goes through, a process with the PUC where they're able to get a huge price increase?
Well, our rates are independent of PG&E's rates.
Mm-hmm.
We set our own rates. We have tracked PG&E and been at 95% of their rate in order to make it easy for our residents or our customers, both business and residents, to compare ours to PG&E. If they implemented a large increase and there wasn't some kind of a payment required into some fund for fire protection or whatever, we wouldn't increase it. We have no need to increase the rates. We're in really good economic condition. If there's an obligation to put into a fire fund or other fund, then that's going to just end up being a pass-through.
And that'd be a PUC?
Now, the issue with PG&E is, I don't know what their rate increase is going to be. It only impacts us if it's on the generation side, because they also are charging all of us for distribution and transmission. So if there are increases in the distribution and transmission side, that'll have no impact on us.
It's a small part of your bill is the generation part.
It's about 30%.
I don't know, it's fascinating time.
Yeah, it's a big time, and PCE and the Cal CCA's position to the PUC has been that the IOUs should be forced to get out of generation 100%. And PG&E hasn't fought that. PG&E's got its own problems, but PG&E's losing its generation customers like crazy. So exactly what happens with that is unclear. It includes a whole issue called provider of last resort. And right now, the IOUs are the providers of last resort. That is, you have to provide electricity to people even if they don't pay, essentially.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And we would, there's certain issues you can deal with them around, but yeah, so you're a provider of last resort, you have to provide electricity. And we're willing to take that responsibility on.
I don't want to take everybody else's time, so I just find this really interesting. It's a fascinating topic. Carrie's not, apparently. It's just, it's like,
Not me. Nothing really going on with the library right now.
All right, anything else? Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Any public comment?
I can email public. I know it's supposed to be at the beginning with these
you
things.
can do it.
It can be at the end too.
We're not going anywhere.
Greg Conlon isn't
It's a
here.
special meeting, it can only be on items on
It's
the
gotta be
agenda.
items on the agenda.
It is, it's SB 50, which is sort of on the.
Not on the
It's not
agenda.
on the agenda.
I'll send emails, fine.
Okay.
Thanks.
That was a nice try, though, Alex.
Okay.
Almost
Motion
backdoor.
to
What
adjourn.
about the-
I wasn't sure legally if I could, but I was.
Oh, so moved.
Okay.
Done.
Done.
Any
Aye.
objections?
I really didn't get to finish the whole thing. And I'm watching PG&E, and it seems like it doesn't work if we have competition.
Yeah, thanks.
Because if you hold it down, legacy fires on, it forces people out, right? And that makes it worse. And I don't know what that
What
dynamic.
happens, how can PCE do the distribution?
Yeah, we
Without
can't,
the
we're not gonna do the, we can't do the.
So PCE is tied at the hip with PG&E to do the
And it
distribution.
seems like the cost really relates to the
That's the
distribution.
receipt here.
No, we're tied at the hip end, but our position is, let them focus on distribution. That's right.
The fires distribution or the fires?
Distribution.
The distribution.
100%, so then that logically ought to flow through to everybody.
Exactly, the liability.
Yeah.
That's why
Yeah,
I-
so that's not gonna, that's gonna be on the distribution side of the house.
Yes, I don't know how PCE gets away from any liability
Maybe that's their silent protest.
of these fires
We-
on distribution.
No, we're not, we don't have any liability for the fire.
That's cool.
The customers ultimately have to pay for it, I think it's the point, right?
We care about what happens, because we think they could sandbag it, and that has been their, way of doing things.
I think Teresa's still here. Did she turn it on?
When is her last day?
The 15th.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
All right, I'll try to remember that.
You need any help?
No, I thought she's here.
Well, she left her
She's
phone,
about
so
to.
she is
She
here.
has to be here.
You need help carrying anything?
I'm just gonna take this back. That's good. I can carry it back. I think so. Hey, well, there she is.
Nice job, fellas.
Thank you, T.
We appreciate it.
Take the rest of the
Appreciate
day.
the help too.
Take the rest of the day off.
Yeah.
Oh, I haven't even missed off yet.
Oh, I was gonna ask you about that.
No, I Good, no.
All right.
Now I just caught that on video too. Wow.
It's all right.
Just remember to edit.